Good morning. I'm Richard Slater, and on behalf of Lancashire Business Feud, this is Private Equity, How It Really Works. Now, I'm delighted to welcome you all to this event, and to be honest, I'm delighted to be here myself. Like many in the county, my knowledge and understanding of private equity and investment generally is perhaps not where it should be. But thankfully, I'll be asking the questions rather than answering them. And whatever the collective noun is for experts, a clever of experts perhaps, well, we've got them. Among our experts are representatives from the sponsors for today's event, from Baines Wilson, EY and LDC. We're delighted to welcome them, and we hope you will find a way to do business with them. So today is about expertise. It's also about ideas, strategies to help you with your decisions. It's about experience. We'll be hearing from all sides of the private equity conversation, including the businesses that have been down that road. With all that in mind, we have briefed our guests that we'd like to consider a number of themes: being prepared, securing the best deal, executing your growth plan, the human aspects of taking investment, and gearing for exit. To do that, we've 8 guests to meet in a trio of discussions. Our first panel will introduce the private equity professionals. They're the ones who can smooth the waters towards a successful deal. We'll tap into their knowledge, their experience, get their expertise, explore what is needed to get the right deal over the line. In our second panel, we'll hear from the entrepreneurs and the business owners who have been involved in successful PE deals. We'll seek insight from their first-hand experiences. We'll also hear about the challenges they've faced and the tips they believe will benefit others looking to grow through private equity. The filling in the panel sandwich is a chat with a pair of Lancastrians to give us a little insight on wider investment options and why it is that we lag behind our metropolitan neighbours in the private equity stakes. The conversations today will form the basis of an extended private equity feature in Lancashire Business View's July-August print issue. It'll also feature online to our 50,000 readers and viewers. We are all, especially our editor, hanging on your every word, ladies and gentlemen. Now, please feel free to join this conversation by asking questions or making observations in the chat box. And at the formal conclusion of the event, we shall decamp to the informal chaos of an all-in networking event, should you wish to stay with us for a virtual brew. Ladies and gentlemen, let's begin by welcoming our sponsors and our first panel of the day. From Baines Wilson, partner Jennifer Bell. From EY, Head of Corporate Finance in the North, Mark Clephan. And from LDC, Investment Director John Clarke. Jennifer is a partner in the corporate and commercial team at business law firm Baines Wilson. Jennifer has for more than 14 years specialised in advising clients on a range of corporate and commercial matters, including mergers and acquisitions, shareholder and investment agreements, restructuring, banking and finance, and commercial contracts. Mark Clephan leads EY's corporate finance business in the north of England. With more than 20 years M&A experience, he has supported many entrepreneurs and business leaders to plan and execute their shareholder strategies, including raising PE funding to support expansion plans and or realign the shareholder base through to exiting to strategic trade. John Clarke supports ambitious management teams across the Northwest, looking to take the next step in their growth journey with the backing of a private equity partner. Since joining LDC in 2017, he's worked on a series of successful partnerships, including the firm's investments in manufacturers ChargePoint and Rhino Products, SRL Traffic Systems, MSQ Partners, where LDC is supporting its international rollout, luxury holiday cottage provider Pure Cottages as well. John has more than 15 years M&A experience, previously worked for Clearwater and Grant Thornton. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our panel. Now, let's start here, if I may. Mark Clephan, to come to you. How do we best describe private equity investment and what's your role in the process?
Morning, Richard. Morning, all. Well, so private equity investment, and John would be probably the best person to ask that question to, I suspect, but private equity investment is funding for some sort of event. and it's finding the right funding for that event that I suppose is the important component. And our role as corporate finance advisors is from start to finish, I suppose. So it's working with an individual or a company front to work out what their need is, and their need might be multiple things. So it might be that they're funding growth, it might be that someone's exiting the business, it might be that they're stepping back to an extent, there might be acquisitions. There's a whole host of reasons why private equity might be appropriate, but really our job number one is to work out what their intention is and how that fits with what private equity might offer. Because again, private equity is a wide church, and really it's about matching up the exact skill sets within the private equity house to the need of the company. And we'll start there, and then we'll go through preparation of information to allow that conversation to take place, identification of who the right parties are, helping with due diligence, helping with data creation, the formulation of that equity story, negotiation of terms, managing due diligence, completion. If ever there was value for money, Richard, that would be a prime example.
And you know what? That's some significant heavy lifting, is that, Mark? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, well, and that's true. I mean, I suppose I sort of make a flippant comment about it. I mean, our engagements, traditionally last, 9 months, somewhere between 9 months and 3 years, depending upon at what point we become involved. We'll become involved earlier in certain situations where people are thinking about what they do over the medium term. And then obviously there's occasions where it's very transactional focused. Someone knows what they have in mind and they want help, in a more condensed time period.
Thank you very much. I wonder if I can come to you, John. You've been teed up nicely there by our friend Mark. So how would you best describe private equity investment, and where do you fit into the process, please?
Yeah, I think Mark summed it up quite well, actually. And I think the point for me is that there can be a range of situations where private equity can help, and that can be family founded and run businesses looking to develop a succession plan, and partially exit some founding family members and sort of de-risk at the same time, or more broadly, founders looking to de-risk at a point in their cycle where they want to continue to operate and run the business because they believe that the business is well set for future growth and value creation, but equally taking some cash might be also attractive. And that's a very common situation. We do very much like situations where management teams might be seeking to buy a business that they don't actually own. So that could be a PLC or a wider group where the management team are vision, and actually they've got what they believe to be a plan to grow and enhance the value of that division in a better way than its current owners, and we can facilitate that. I think that they're the sort of the primary situations, and I think where private equity can really help, and what we look for, I suppose, in all of those situations, fundamentally, is a management team that's optimistic within reason in terms of the growth ambitions that they've got, and bringing in an investment partner as well as a strategic partner that's sort of been there and seen it before in terms of how to grow businesses through different strategies perhaps than the business has pursued historically. Then that's where I think private equity can really help leverage our experience, leverage our access to capital, and go from there, really.
Thank you very much. Jennifer Bell from Baines Wilson, solicitors practice. I wonder if you could tell us how you fit into this PE story, please, Jennifer. Can you hear me, Jennifer?
Sorry, yeah, I can
That's
hear
okay.
you now. Thanks, Richard. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
From a legal aspect, I think the where we fit in, and to add to what John and Mark have already said, is that with private equity, obviously it's finance for a business, but the key difference to your normal traditional routes of finance is that investor or private equity house takes a share of the company. So they are investing through acquiring shares in that company. So they're going to become a key partner with the existing shareholders. So from a legal perspective and the role of the lawyer, we're looking to obviously help prepare that business for what the investor is going to be looking at. So it's looking at the key contracts and making sure that they're there, that the assets are in the right place, and that there's no holes really. So it's helping from the very beginning to prepare for that investigation and the due diligence that the investors going to undertake. And then moving on from that due diligence, it will be to help negotiate and draft the legal documentation that need to be put in place. So there's normally an investment agreement which would regulate the legal relationship between the investor and the existing shareholders. And then there's the articles of association that be put in place, which will deal with what rights those shares will carry that the investor will want, and how the investor will look at exiting that business. And I think the key role for us is helping the existing shareholders to understand that documentation and to make sure that it's completely right and will fit with them going forward. Because the last thing you want is to do this, get through to completion, and then sit there afterwards regretting what you've done because you've not necessarily understood what the implications are going to be.
So you're, in part, Jennifer, you are a translator.
Yes, a translator and a protector.
Oh, I like translator and a protector. That is a new logo, I think, ready to be written. Now, John, if I can come back to you, we've got this idea. We have fantastic businesses in Lancashire, very dynamic, very diverse business community in the county. But we do have, and every source that we speak to tells us this, we do have a fear of taking investment, or it certainly appears. Now, this is a bit of an unusual way of asking a question in a journalistic fashion, but I want to talk about the things that it isn't, in a sense. What are the myths around private equity that generate fear, John?
Yeah, good question. Good question. Obviously, we come up against this quite a lot. But I think the starting point, which is probably the biggest myth and the most common, is that private equity dictate to management teams and business owners how to operate and run their businesses successfully. That is always the misconception. When I first meet an owner or a management team, there's always the horror stories that they believe are all due to private equity coming in with their views on strategy that might not be entirely aligned to the plans of the management team. The private equity gets its own way and value is eroded. That is generally the starting point, unfortunately, which certainly from an LDC perspective, and I do think it is more broader than LDC, I think it's consistent across private equity, is that is, as far from the truth as can be. We absolutely recognise that we're not operators of businesses, we are investors. We clearly have expertise and can support management teams, and we've seen clearly a number of very successful outcomes where businesses have been able to grow through private equity backing. But what we are not is experts in operating businesses, and the last thing that we ever want to do is impose a strategy on business owners that is not completely bought into by those owners and the management teams within them. So I think that's simply the single biggest misconception. The second one is, private equity is about investing into business.
We've just lost John there. I'm going to come over to Mark Clephan in the meantime. Mark, where I think John was taking us there was the idea that investors aren't going to take over your business. That's one of the fears.
Yeah.
That's something that you recognise, and in part, we need to get over this hurdle in order you can help the businesses in the county, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, he made a point that was observation number one, and I agree. A fear that there isn't going to be the autonomy after private equity has been involved, and I would agree that just can't be the case. I mean, private equity doesn't know how to run the business to any semblance of a degree that the management team know how to run the business. And indeed, if you've been through a process, the people that the private equity house are backing are that management team, and they're backing the plan that management team has created. So the worry that they're going to come in and take over and direct in a different way, I think is unfounded. They will undoubtedly, want to stress test, assumptions and key strategic decisions. And to be honest, if you don't want that, then, that is what private equity is about. I mean, that if you go back to the start, why would you take private equity? There's a whole load of transactional reasons why you might want to do it. But I think high up there in why you would do it is because you want the expertise, the different range of experiences that private equity has to offer around the table. I think that's really important.
Do you feel, Mark, there's a sense, I always fear the idea of groupthink. And when you get an outsider coming to have a look at a business, whether it's for an investment opportunity or another opportunity, if you're not going to embrace that, I think you're right, there's just no point going there. But if you are going to embrace that, there can be some bigger, wider thinking that comes into your business. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And part of matching the management team and the business to private equity is not just about money. It's about working out how the culture works, that you trust the private equity house, that you see them as individuals, that there's a match of experiences with need. There's a whole host of things which are softer than who's going to pay the most money. Yeah. I mean, it's my job to make sure that the best fit also pays the most money, so that you have the best of all worlds. But yeah, it's a complicated situation, and with a lot more than just financial metrics in it. And I suppose, just in relation to your previous question, what are the big myths? I think another one that I hear all the time is around that private equity won't invest in growth. This asset strippers line that is frequently put out in the press as an easy, careless, soundbite. Yeah. Private equity only make money by the business growing. They only make money by generating equity value, which is what the management team wants and what the vendor wants if he leaves a bit of money behind. And therefore, that is very frequently done, or almost always done, by investing in growth, such that the business is bigger and it's more dependable and it's got different geographies and it's got a wider set of products and it's got a portfolio effect, it's more resilient and it's more attractive to the next person, whoever that person is. And therefore you've created equity value, and therefore that's what private equity want, and they have a period of time to invest to allow that to happen.
Thank you. Sorry.
So I think there are a couple of things there, and there are definitely some myths. And if you were thinking about private equity, you'd be wise to sort of research those things properly, I suppose, and take quite a few opinions on those of people that have had the experience.
Thank you, Mark. Welcome back, John. John, you were unfortunately cut off in your prime. You'd got to the end of myth 1. You were about to give us myth 2. If you can remember what myth 2 was, please share it with us. Otherwise, just move on to myth 3.
Sorry about that. It's the office Wi-Fi. It was actually Mark just nailed myth 2, which was just a point around.
Aren't they?
I guess asset stripping, and where can private equity really add value. and support the growth journey. But that is, fundamentally the point that Mark's just made there around the willingness to invest. And I think the biggest point about private equity is, we are shoulder to shoulder with the wider shareholder group. That's the whole reason that private equity exists. Therefore, our interests are aligned to everybody else's that we're in partnership with. Therefore, we're going to make the right decisions for the business and the shareholders as a group. And I think that goes beyond as well. It's not always just about situations where we're trying to grow. We all recognise that not all businesses grow. People do call things wrong, management teams and investors. And it is that, what do we do when we're in a situation that we didn't expect? Again, I think there's a lot of myths around how private equity behave in those situations. But actually, there can be some real positives. If investment is required in those situations, we're able to provide it where other source of funding may not be available, but equally we've got the expertise. And I think we saw that, to be fair, 18 months ago when, hate to get onto the topic and raise it, but when COVID did happen, we were straight out of the blocks with our portfolio company to say we need to do X, Y, and Z. And I think that was very valuable.
Thank you. If I move to you, Jennifer, in some ways, I kind of guess if I think about it, if this was me and we were taking investment, this might be a one-off for a business like me. So, using my trusted lawyer, I would have my friend by my side, I feel. So, how do you describe the myths, Jennifer, and how do you encourage your clients who you may know quite well that this is for them?
Well, I think one of the main myths, or one of the main things we get from clients, is obviously a concern over giving away their shareholding. Basically, they're usually a very significant shareholder with perhaps maybe 100% or 75 up. So they do have concerns over giving away a huge chunk and reducing the amount that they're going to get at the end. So I think it's, explaining to them and reassuring them the whole point of this is to grow that business, which ultimately grows the return. So whilst they may only have a smaller percentage, they're going to get more from that smaller than they would anyway.
Is better than 100% of nothing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the other thing as well is that they have concerns that they're going to be pushed into an exit. Private equity houses obviously look sometimes for an exit between 3 to 5 years or 5 to 7 years, dependent. I think their fear is often that they're going to be pushed into an exit when they're not ready for that exit. And it's, explaining to them as well that, if they've got the right partner and they've got the similar outcomes with this in mind, which is a return on capital going forward, then when an exit is right for the PE house or the high net worth individual, it will usually also be right for that particular existing shareholder as well, because it will be the optimum time for exit. And that's usually for both parties as well, because you'll have corporate finance advice from the likes of Mark, which will be telling you that this is the time when you can get the most from this business. And also touching as well on what Mark said, provided that they've done their research correctly at the start and they've engaged with the various different PE houses and investors, it's a partnership at the end of the day. So provided you've got the right fit of people, then, and you're all aligned with the same views, then a lot of the myths will be dispelled going forward, because you'll be working together with people that you get on with. And I think that's the main thing.
Thanks very much. I've got some questions in from our audience, which I'm going to ping around to you. This is from Paul Nugent, who's the Chief Executive of the Sante Group. Just put your hand up who fancies taking this one. What is the minimum stake a PE firm requires? John, Mark, Jennifer, is there a minimum?
I can say that. I think Mark will, I'm sure, contribute. I think I don't think there is actually a minimum. It's all about, different firms, there's a wide spectrum of private equity, and different firms try and invest in certain types of ways. But the honest answer is private equity will invest from 10 to 80%, 85% stakes. There's a market, whatever you are seeking for, equity for, you will be able to find it. LDC, generally speaking, we seek roughly 35% as a minimum stake, and that's just basically about making the economics work for us. But all sorts of situations.
That's great, that, John. Thank you very much. So Paul Nugent, I think we're talking, it's just over a third if it's LDC, but anywhere between 10 and 85, 10 and 80, depending on the provider. And
but below that, Richard, you've got other products, haven't you? So you know, banks are at no equity. There's products that sit between private equity and banks with smaller amounts of warrants and small amounts of shares. So basically, you've got anything in different products from 0% equity all the way up to full ownership.
Thank you, Mark. Can I put this one to you as well then? This is sorry, some personal thinking here as well. How does the private, this is from John Cottam, who's a director at Bolton Engineering Holdings. If I can put this one to you, Mark, how does the private equity investor eventually exit the business?
So they go into it with an agreement with the management team of the likely time period to achieve what they're looking to achieve. You have an agreement over and an understanding over what those returns might look like. So there should be alignment at the front end. Now then what happens is the will gets in the way and everything changes over the course of that investment. And it might be that you go sooner or you go later. It might be that you thought it was going to be a private equity secondary deal or an IPO, and it turns out to be a trade sale. So you'd keep that under review over the whole period of the investment, and then at exit, at the time when you both deem that it is the right time to exit, you will execute on that plan, and the private equity house would sell their stake. They would sell it. They wouldn't be able to sell it, and they're not able to sell it from under the feet of management. So they're not able to sell and have other shareholders left within the business. So you all do it together. And similarly, albeit there are certain protections that allow private equity to not be stuck in businesses forever, you know, you've got to remember it's their model to buy and sell, so that they need to be able to sell. It has to be a joint decision, because John can't sell without dragging management along with him, or sorry, a better way, or having management sitting alongside with him.
Without cooperative support.
How can you sell to another private equity house, or how can you sell to a trade acquirer if management are there saying, well, this is not the right thing to do? John doesn't run the business, so everyone around that board table needs to be in agreement that it's the right thing to do at the right time.
Thank you very much, Mark. And I'm going to put this one to you. This is another question. Can you take this one for me, Jennifer, perhaps? This is Chris at Pendle Bike Racks here. I'm going to just read it out. A personal worry is the Dragon's Den. I know, he says, style disagreement over valuation. How does a company reach a fair valuation before entering discussions with a PE house? I think that's part of your job, isn't it, Jen?
Well, no, unfortunately, we don't do valuations. That's fallen onto the likes of Mark. It's the accountants and the corporate financiers which would look at the figures and come up with the formula for the valuations. There's various different methods.
Thank you. Well, in that case, can I just re-angle to you, Jen, and just a slightly different question? Just how do you, because I think you know these clients, how do you help them manage their emotional aspects as well as the legal aspects of this project?
It's being there for them, Richard, at the end of the day. It's being appreciative of the fact that, you know, they are still running the business. So they're running the business all of the time, and at the same time trying to deal with everything that goes with investment on top of that. So, you know, it's letting them know and reassuring them that they can talk to you anytime. You know, we're not 9 to 5 lawyers. We don't take calls during that time. And it's, you know, normally I find with most of my clients, they don't sit down and think of any of this until they've done their day's work. They're sat Yeah, they're sat at home thinking about it at that stage, and they think, oh no, I can't speak to anybody till Monday, and they get panicked. Well, that isn't the way we deal with it. We deal with it by being there for them at all times, and explaining things in normal everyday language with how it will affect them.
Thank you. Now I'm just going to give, you are going to come back and join us at the end of the session, but just one very last question. I'm going to ask a really unfair question. So I'm expecting you to work on your précis skills here, and it is this: what advantages does PE offer? So Mark, why PE?
Well, I'll go back to what I've said before. I think you go for PE if you value the experiences that they've had. If you just want money, I can find an alternative way to give you money. You want to have money and the experiences that they've got to grow your business.
That's a perfect answer. Thank you, sir. And to you, John Clarke, just a very quick one for us. Why PE?
Yeah, I think why PE versus any other source of funding. I guess it is that point around absolute alignment and partnership with the other shareholders around the board table that drives the right decision making, strategic support, and the ability to put our hand in our pocket to take advantage of opportunities.
Thank you very much. And Jennifer, to you, why PE?
Because of the experience that it can bring to your business and those fresh new ideas to help you grow.
Absolutely brilliant. We'll try and come back to Chris's question about Dragon's Den later, but in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, would you please thank our first three guests from we've got John, we've got Jennifer, and we've got Mark. How fabulous were they? Thank you all for your expertise, and we'll see you in about half an hour or so. Thank you very much. Now, let's please welcome our next two guests for today's event. As I said earlier, they are the filling in the panel sandwich, and they are Steve Wall. Steve is Equity Investment Manager at Access to Finance Northwest. He supports local SMEs and entrepreneurs who are seeking equity funding to develop their businesses. He works with a broad range of local investors and business professionals in order to facilitate investment into local early stage businesses. Steve plays a pivotal role in the service's investment readiness offer, helping businesses to develop the expertise and the skills needed to pitch for investment. Stuart Thompson is Managing Director at Reorient Consulting, an internationally experienced non-exec director, an exec coach and consultant who helps business owners, CEOs and senior directors fundraise, build value and create successful companies. Stuart, until recently, was the chair of the Institute of Directors for Lancashire. He sits on many boards, and he is described mostly by himself as a driven, commercially astute, motivational director and outstanding executive coach. He has wide-ranging experience of leading and developing teams in multiple sectors. Gentlemen, good morning to you, and thank you for joining this event. Steve Wall, can you tell us about the work you do and who you do it for? Oh, Steve, you might need to click a button there, sir. There you go.
Basically, Access to Finance was set up probably about 10 years ago to enable SMEs to actually get funded. Were at one point the banks and none of the other funders were particularly interested in lending money to SMEs. However, it was recognised that there's more than just lending. There's equity. There's everything between sort of lending a small amount of money and also private equity. So consequently, we were set up to actually find money for SME businesses. What we do is effectively we will talk to all the accountants, all the lawyers, all the LEPs in the area, and we're particularly focused on Lancashire and Greater Manchester. And we will set ourselves up so that we so that we can help any SME that is presented to us. With that in mind, we get a lot of businesses which are quite early stage and looking for funding. Usually very early stage, usually pre-seed, and this is where our sort of this is where we major.
Thank you. Stuart Thompson, same question if you don't mind. Tell us about the work you do and who you do it for.
Hi, Richard. Thank you for the introduction. I'm going to keep a copy of that because that was better than I could do. So thank you very much.
Written it.
I have, I suppose I have two roles. The first role is on behalf of the company. So I work with companies seeking investment, looking for growth. That can involve evaluating their business objectives, developing pitch decks, coaching the directors, and then navigating. I predominantly work in venture capital. So the lower end, below private equity, I suppose, but finance for companies.
Can I just stop you there for a second? Could you just give us a very briefly, private equity, venture capital, just for the audience?
I suppose in simple terms, private equity generally get involved with businesses that are revenue positive, earning money, looking to do different things. Venture capital loosely is at the lower end of the market in terms of pre-revenue potentially, or good ideas, riskier potentially in terms of getting going. So the start post-angel, so angel investment is generally very low end, and then and between that and private equity, that helps. And then that comes on to, I suppose, the second part of my role. So I've been described many things, but one of the better things I've been described as is a friend of the house. So venture capital firms use me to evaluate businesses that have come to them for funding, usually on sector experience. So I have certain sector specialities, but also technical specialities, so commercialization of innovation. And they'll give me a plan and say, what do you think of this? I'll go into the company, interview the directors, have a conversation with them, and then make my recommendations. And sometimes the recommendations will mean the funding goes ahead. If the funding goes ahead, I'll join the business as a non-exec chair or non-exec director and help on the growth journey.
Very good, thank you very much. Now, you both know why I really want to talk to you today, and it's this idea that Lancashire, as a group of businesses, we're not as active in private equity or in other forms of investment as our metropolitan neighbours. And I'm wondering, very simply, Stuart, why?
I think there are a number of reasons. I mean, at a very high level, we've probably not been great from a policy perspective and sort of driving why come to Lancashire. But I do think there are a lot of deals out there. I mean, certainly funders, the funding is there. There are certain gaps in the funding. The guys at Access to Finance do a fantastic job in pointing people, but there are certain gaps. So east side of Lancashire, angel level funding is maybe not as high. But if you go into north and west, certainly Bay Angels have done some great stuff recently. But it's also about getting a better influence. I think the LEP is now working hard. It's identified this and it's working hard, and I'm involved in some of the conversations to develop policies which support investment in the county. But also things like investor networks. So if you go into the cities, and what I'm talking about predominantly is Liverpool and Leeds, I should say Leeds because I go there as well, and Manchester, there are very active investor networks. Some of the professional services firms, a previous panel, they're incredibly well connected. And one of the reasons that you engage with these companies is the skill that they bring through their networks. But those networks, I often meet with within those networks, within Manchester and within Liverpool and different cities, and we have these discussions. So that continuity of discussion from start to finish is also really important.
Thank you.
The other one is commercial acuity. We are certainly getting better, but people understanding what it is about VC, what it is about PE, and why it's important. A lot of the firms will have really good content on their websites. Mercia, Maven, they've got some great stuff on what to look for and how to shape yourself up. So understanding why you need, or if you need, equity finance is also really important, because as one of your previous speakers said, is it venture capital finance? Is it private equity finance? Is it some form of debt finance? Google those things because it's probably useful to you. But they'd be two or three things I would say are important.
Yeah, thank you very much. And to you, Steve Wall, I am intrigued in pushing this conversation along. It's your job, all you do is talk to people about money. What is it that hinders our domestic market, our Lancashire market, from making these pushes that seem natural more natural to other areas? What is it, Steve?
Okay. I operate in both Lancashire and also in Greater Manchester. And there's a massive difference between the two. In Greater Manchester, there seems to be a hunger from the entrepreneurs to actually seek finance. In Lancashire, that hunger seems to be lacking. Now, I don't know whether that is because of the marketing that goes on behind it, or whether the people don't realise what equity is and what it can do for the business. But it's certainly in Greater Manchester. I know that I would say that probably out of the deals that are done, it's probably somewhere in the region of about 85-15. It's a massive disparity between the two. Now, if we then look at Lancashire and we make it more available to people and let people know that it exists, then I think that it would be more, how can I say, acceptable by the business community. It's not just the early stage stuff, it's the mid stage business as well. The business that's probably bootstrapped itself, it's got some money into itself, it may well have an angel, but then there's a big gap between the angel funding and the venture capitalist. Usually it should be the likes of Maven or Mercia to actually fill that gap. But in Lancashire, it seems to be missing. In Greater Manchester, they've got the Greater Manchester Investment Fund, which can help fill that gap. In Lancashire, we don't seem to have this gap filler. So there's a couple of issues there. A is that we've not got a high enough profile in terms of equity, and on the other side of the coin, we don't really have a solution to the gap in the middle, which is something which I know that the LEP and the council are working on at this moment in time.
I think I'd be kind of interested, and I don't know if you know this, as it's a question I'm just punting that I didn't plan in advance. Lancashire's economy is about the same size as city region of Liverpool's. In fact, Lancashire's is a touch bigger, or pre-pandemic levels. Do we know how it operates Liverpool versus Lancashire in those similarly sized economies?
We don't have too much information on Liverpool, but when we used to work with Liverpool, Liverpool used to probably produce about 40% of what we used to see. Greater Manchester used to do about 50 and Lancashire about 10.
Okay, thank you. So I think when we're getting to, there's a kind of a place we're arriving at here, isn't it? It's the learning about this sort of stuff is the starting point. So I think with that in mind, just one more thing then, Stuart, what kind of top tip, what kind of simple piece of advice could you give to a growing business that might persuade them, or a business that wants to, might persuade them that PE or another alternative investment is the right thing for them? What's the one thing you would say?
I mean, there's a few things. One of the main things, I suppose, is an echo of what was said in the last panel. People that get into these deals, they want to win. So they are in it for the success. They're not in there to drive your business down. They're not in to create failure. They want to, that's why they're doing it. They want to see success. But the due diligence that they do is thorough for a good reason, because they want to see that success. But I would also advise companies to do their own due diligence. So understand simple things like, what's the VC's business model or the PE firm's business model? What's their attitude to investment? What's their time frame? You'll hear words like patient capital. Well, in VC, there may be non-patient capital. So the journey you're about to go on, if it's equity funding you need, probably the first question, what type of funding? And the corporate finance guys will tell you better options if you don't think it's for you. But secondly, once you do that, you're on the journey for a number of years. So you're sat next to somebody in the car who's going to be with you, thick and thin. So the other one is fit. Like any good board, when you're bringing somebody into the business, they've got to fit. You've got to understand them personally. If you're going to be dealing with this individual and they're going to sit around your board table, the personalities matter. It's really important that you match as individuals just as well as strategically where is the business going. I think also the other thing as well, one of the tips would be clear up front about what your objective, understand your own objectives, and everybody around the table. I remember a horror story of two founders who had different objectives about an exit that they didn't realize they both had because they'd never had the conversation. And it was only when they sat in front of me and I asked them 2 pieces of paper, one to each, and said, where are you going to be in 3 to 5 years? And they wrote it down and gave me the answers, and I pushed it back, switched them over, and they both went, they've not had the. So really clearly understand what your objectives are and the time frame, and be clear to all the people that are involved. Get professional services advice, because it's vital, and they're experts. They're in it to make you win. That's what I'd say.
Thank you very much. And I'm just going to finish with this one then. And this is in from John Jones, our partner at Beaver Struthers. I'm going to put this to you, Steve. What sectors are there sectors that are particularly attractive to PE investments, and are there any sectors that are just not attractive at all?
Yeah, we see lots and lots of digital, and we see lots of biotech. However, the ones that obviously business angels tend to sort of like things that they understand themselves, and especially in the likes of Lancashire, engineering is very attractive to the angel networks. Anything to do with product. And they also like businesses that have been up and running for a while and they've got a decent management team behind them. Product sometimes is irrelevant. It tends to be, the quality of the management team that sits behind the business going forward.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please thank our guests, Stuart Thompson and Steve Wall. Thank you both. That's been tremendous. Now, last but not least, in terms of guest gatherings, I am delighted to introduce you to our business panel. So would you please welcome Hayley Roberts, who's the Chief Exec at Distology, Ian Watson, Chief Exec at Hotter Shoes, and Gary Jacobson, Chairman at Rhino Products. Now, following a 20-plus year career in blue chip retail, recruitment and technology, Hayley Roberts is now the owner and driving force behind IT security distributor Distology. The company specializes in identifying, representing and distributing the latest disruptive technology into the cyber security arena. They have won many awards and accolades, and this year received investment from PE group North Edge to further fuel the aggressive growth plans Hayley envisages for the company. Ian Watson is the Chief Exec of Hotter Shoes, hotter.com, the UK's biggest footwear manufacturer. He's also the cover star of the current issue of Lancashire. Oh, I've got a copy of that. Yeah, I'll show that. Current cover star of Lancashire Business View. There you go. Now selling over 1 million pairs of shoes a year to more than 4 million customers around the world, Ian's digitalization strategy has enabled the specialist footwear brand to counter the downturn in traditional physical retail and defy market forecasts. It's a really good read, by the way. I commend it to you all. Anyway, that's all led to Hotter announcing its intention to float on London's alternative investment market, the AIM, in 2021. With a career spanning multiple international companies, including, I'm going to get the pronunciation of this wrong, I think. It's either Britax or it's Britax, but it's that, you know the one I mean. Childcare, and also Startright Shoes. Ian is a leading voice in the fashion and retail sector, offering global viewpoints on market issues. And Gary Jacobson is a business leader and investor focused on manufacturing, energy, and technology, where it can enhance the customer experience. Gary's a serial private equity investor, having completed deals with Barclays Ventures, Bank of Scotland Integrated Finance, Collar Capital, and Lloyds Development Capital, or LDC, one of our sponsors today. Gary acquired Bifold in 2002, made a series of acquisitions and sold to Rotork in 2015, providing significant equity returns for management, and perhaps let him tell you what the level of that significance was. Gary's currently chairman of Rhino Products, where he invested alongside LDC. He's working with two technology companies, two companies working on zero carbon energy projects. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome our three guests? I'm going to come to you first, Hayley, if I may. Hayley from Distology, tell us the story of investment in your business.
Oh, it's a long one. But,
okay, we've got plenty of time. Bed in, ladies and gentlemen.
So I'm probably the epitome of naivety when it comes to investment. And it was the investment was born out of a frustration I had with a silent shareholder, where I felt kind of not able to aggressively grow the business how I wanted to. And bearing in mind, when you think about technology, certainly in cybersecurity, innovation runs at a very, very fast pace. So if you don't invest, if you don't capitalize on new markets, if you don't become more agile, then you lose the race effectively, because somebody else will swoop in and do things before you do. So that's why I thought about exiting a shareholder, but I was naive to the point where I thought, as the certainly John and Mark and Jennifer alluded to in the beginning, that all of a sudden these kind of finance bods, these accountants in private equity are going to roll into the business, tell me that I know nothing about what I'm doing, back off lady, we're going to take over. And I was frightened of that, right? And I didn't know any other option, quite honestly. So I looked at a few options, and I eventually, after speaking to a few advisors, chose EY, who've been absolutely fantastic, by the way, just a bit of a plug for them, but they were brilliant in kind of boiling it down to basics, and to language I understood, and to give me the confidence to look at private equity businesses. And actually, you know, and I think Jennifer made that point in the beginning about people. This is nothing to do with business at the end of the day. I think if you look after your people and culture, business comes. And it's almost a DNA match between yourself and who invests, whether that is a private equity or venture capitalist business, or even going to your bank. You've got to kind of feel that you are being backed, because ultimately, as a small business owner that's fast growing, you know, you've been used to paying the bills and at the coalface consistently. What you don't want to do is feel like you've got to then be beholden to or reporting into other people's vision and mission. You want to be able to have that really a nitrous oxide boost from whoever gives you that, you know, that investment, right? So it did take about 9 months. I learned a lot along the way. I think you've just got to be open-minded and bust. I have to say, I think I bust many myths in my own mind and perceptions that I had, certainly in terms of private equity. And it's been the best decision I've ever made.
Well, stop there. That's a great way to finish that conversation. To you, Gary Jacobson, investment in your business, and why PE for you? Gary just frozen on us. We'll come back to Gary. Ian Watson, if I'll come to you instead. Tell us about the development of Hotter and what role investment has played in the Hotter story.
Yeah, I think so. Hotter has been under private equity ownership for a number of years. It was first bought from the founding family with the private equity business called Gresham in 2011. And the private equity business I work for, Electra, we bought it in 2014. So, you know, there's been a long period of ownership of the business. And, you know, over the time, they backed previous management teams. I've been here since 2019. So, you know, my background is I have no experience of choosing an investor, but I've worked in 3 private equity backed businesses. And, you know, I went through an exit from one private equity house to another in my time. And it's Britax, by the way. The company's called British Accessories. So it's English, not American. So it's Britax. So during the time here at Hotter, you know, they've invested heavily in technologies through the business and have helped fund the digitalization process that, you know, I've been executing over the last couple of years. So again, I think all the advice that people have given, I think it's when you're choosing which partner to work with, I think you really got to understand what operating model these private equity houses operate within, because, you know, if you are the owner of a business today and you have quite a hands-on autocratic style, the last thing you want to do is partner up with a private equity house that has operating partners who are then going to come and sit in your office and take you through these. So I think the guys have all said that. I think understanding what they can do for you.
Definitely what Haley was frightened of, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, you know, I've got quite a network of friends who are all CEOs of private equity businesses, and, you know, in some respects they choose the wrong partner that just doesn't fit with them and their style of working, and then you've got a problem. But I think, you know, our owners here have understood that we needed to change the business model. We're very clear on our exit timings, and, you know, they backed me massively to get the job done. And I think again, when you work with private equity house that has multiple assets, they bring to the party a whole different view of the world that you may not have as a shoe manufacturer in Skelmersdale, right?
But it's all additional information, isn't it? It's things you can work with, isn't it?
Yeah, and they bring a suite of experts to the party as well that have areas that you don't particularly understand. We're in the early stages of an IPO process. I've never led an IPO before. The Equity House is a PLC that I work for and have huge experience. So again, people bring different things to the party, I think.
Thank you very much. Gary, welcome back. I think we've got you now. Tell us a little bit about the story of investment into your business and why PE for you?
Right, well, firstly, why PE? Each of the businesses I've been involved in were buying out a private owner. So under those circumstances, there are few mechanisms that enable you to acquire the business, because in effect, you need debt where you're not paying back capital during the period of growth. So I would say, think of it like an interest-only mortgage.
Yeah.
So if you're buying a business off a private vendor and you want to grow, you might consume cash, and you need to watch the cash burden on the business as you grow. So there aren't many mechanisms that work well for businesses buying out private owners or where they need to grow very quickly. It supports the comments the other panelists have made that choosing the right partner who have the right operating model and right objectives, you can translate that down into how their cash is required back, and then map that into how your business is operated. And then I would say just make sure that your accountant or your finance director can model that returns required of the investor carefully and make sure that is the right model for you.
I was going to say, how important are those advisors to you, Gary? Despite, I mean, you guys are really experienced in what you do, but just how important are those advisors for you?
I think they are critical, and some people will. If I take, for example, your legal advisors, when you get near to the completion of a deal, the amount of work ratchets up significantly, and making sure that you've got a law firm that's big enough to be able to deal with that, I think is critical. But then within that law firm, make sure the characters you're dealing with, people that you trust, and that you can call on them at any time. The same thing comes with the corporate finance people. They need to understand the CEO who's buying the business and the management team, and make sure that he's answering, that the corporate finance house is answering their concerns. And again, it needs to be a big enough firm that when you get near to the completion of deal, that they're not overwhelmed with the work content.
Thank you.
Don't be tempted to go too small because you'll regret it.
Thank you. Hayley, coming back to you, you described some kind of trauma, difficulty with the idea of it all. I wonder, you've given us a hint of it, but what is it like from the inside, and how would you recommend others prepare for the process that you've been through?
Well, I think in terms of the scary nature of it, and what I was frightened of was, firstly, I suppose, having people who knew better than me coming along and from a financial point of view, kind of swiping us aside. But one of the things that I think I would recommend, and we thought we were quite a together business, quite a simple model, even though there are so many different avenues in tech. It was, again, you were having to explain what you did and where you sat within the kind of channel model that we operate in. And so I thought that we were quite clean, quite an easy business. We were using an external accountant. And because my silent shareholder was trying to keep an eye on very low costs, I wasn't allowed to hire a finance director. I mean, and this is why EY were fantastic, because they handheld me through so many different processes. And I'm no finance guru. I'd never experienced working in private equity. I literally had, felt lucky that I was getting so far along the road and growing my business all along, massive imposter syndrome. So for me to say, right, well, now I need a finance person, and now I didn't know what I needed that would literally help with due diligence and all the processes involved. So I would say, if you don't have a finance director in-house, get one before you look at private equity. And don't worry about not knowing what private equity holds, because not once in my journey did I ever know what was, who was doing what and what this would mean for me. I just asked a lot of questions. And I think, like, every day is a school day. Even if you have had experience of working with private equity, they're all very, very different. As I said, for me, it was choosing the people in those companies who wouldn't just be fantastic in terms of creating, the right financial modeling and market awareness, but also helping me create that value piece that was really important to the buckets of growth that we're now seeing. And the acceleration, even in the few months that we've had private equity, has been massive. And I feel like it's more my business now than it was before when I had a small shareholder who did nothing, because I've almost been given, my wings were clipped before by a shareholder who's kind of, kiboshing some of and we were equal shareholders, kiboshing some of the ideas I had. And now I feel like it's a case of keep going, keep growing. And it's brilliant.
Thank you for that. I think that could be a nice headline in there for us. I feel more in control now than I did when I owned the whole thing. That's quite fascinating. I wonder, let's just focus on that. Ian Watson for a second. That sounded counterintuitive. What can you tell us that's counterintuitive? Perhaps you frame it as, where did you expect pain and didn't get it? Where did you not expect pain and did get it?
Yeah, I can completely understand where Hayley's coming from. I think when you're constrained with your thought process with the people that you've got around you, I think what a private equity house will do will challenge your thinking around growth. And one of the guys said it earlier, we all gain when we create equity value. No one gains when we don't. So I think that's the key part here, is that they will challenge your thinking, and you will start and think slightly broader around what you're doing. And Hayley's example there, as you start and therefore bring more people into the company and start to professionalize further, then that thinking expands at a faster rate, I think is so I think it's the quality that they bring to the environment. The downside of private equity sometimes is that they sometimes feel that there is a silver bullet for every issue that comes up, and therefore the bigger the PE house, the more they rely on external consultants. And again, sometimes that's helpful as well, because you learn things in those models that perhaps you didn't come across in your career earlier. So I think there's a lot of positives to be had from it.
Thank you very much. I've got a question in from Amin Kamaluddin, who works for SK Growth. And it's an interesting question. How important is storytelling? What can the panel tell us about how they went about creating their stories in order to attract investors? Gary, what was the story you told, Gary?
I will talk back to my own businesses. I put together the storytelling is you'll have a basic finance model that the original investment is based on, but the storytelling is about the vision and the growth, where that business is going to go to and why. And that's the vision that the investors are tied into. So if you've got a business, for example, that can configure its product to order and deliver in 24 hours, then in the internet age, we can trade faster than our competition and consume our competitors in that space. So that vision and storytelling about the business is the key to which the investors are looking at, and it's something that your employees tag onto. Now, I can imagine that both with Ian and Hayley's businesses, that their stories are one of excitement and animation. And I think that's, as well as having the financial story behind you, it's that story that generates the excitement for everybody involved.
I appreciate that, Gary. Thank you very much. It does feel like a really good question, this. I'm gonna steal this one, Amin, from future reference, if you don't mind. But how about you, Hayley, telling the story? I mean, we as business owners, we love nothing more than telling the story of our business. But how did the story change when it came to finance, and how important was the?
I can't shut up about my business, so I'm constantly telling stories.
Okay,
and by the way,
we can mute you. So.
And by the way, it's my fourth industry since graduating, so I don't believe that any business has got any unique issues from a day-to-day running point of view. Yes, we're all idiosyncratic and maybe the products and services we offer, but I think we all experience the same pains and gains. So for me, the storytelling was, I think it's hard to quantify. I work in a services business. We don't have a tangible product, right? So we're representing different vendors and brands. And it's the service level, the value piece anyway, that we give to our customers and ultimately ultimately end users of our products. So it is all around the story, but it's also about the doing the do, just not just telling the story, but to quantify that when your private equity business or even your advisor says, okay, now let's look at what that means from a financial point of view. Where's the growth trajectory go? Not being a finance head, I went, I know. And then most of it was my gut feel says, well, my gut feel is not financial. So how to quantify that too? And I'm getting really good at this now. So going through the value creation and what that means is great. But the storytelling is good, because ultimately what you want to get from a private equity company is buying into you as a management team and where your story is going. So not just there's a story retrospectively, and we've hit a point, but where do you want that story to go? So it's not the backstory, it's the forward story, it's the trajectory you want to go on.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna end with a question from Laura Hartley from the Laura Hartley recruitment business. What was your biggest learning from going through the process that you can share with us? I mean, you may have some learnings that you don't want to share with us. Obviously, those are the ones we really want to hear. But what was the biggest learning that you can share with our viewers and readers? Gary Jacobson.
I would say have a great quality finance director, as Hayley mentioned earlier. Choose your PE firm carefully. Make sure that you feel that you trust them and that they can speak to you and you can speak to them, and then get some really good quality advisors.
Thank you, Gary. To you, Ian, what is your biggest learning from going through the processes that you can share with our readers and viewers?
Yeah, just get the best people. I'd agree with Gary. You need the best people. The CFO is so important in this scenario, but also if you're going through this experience as a management team, that team's got to be aligned before you start. So I think making sure that you all want to do this, because you're signing up pretty much to a growth agreement over a period of time that you will all be rewarded on if you achieve it. And therefore having those aligned values at the start's really good, because you don't want to get in 2 years into the process and 2 or 3 of you are highly committed and another one is maybe not quite pulling along at the same pace. So I think that would be my advice.
Thank you very much. And to you, Hayley, finally, the question was, what's your biggest learning? Basically, what would you try and get us to avoid to do? What's going to make it easier for the rest of us? What's your biggest learning, Mom?
Try and nail your purpose. It is all about people. Get the best advisors and don't undersell yourself on that either. Yes, it might seem like they might cost money, but it pays back in dividends, absolutely. And also, don't be frightened to go and talk to private equity houses anyway. Pick up the phone to them, have a chat. There's no obligation there. They're people at the end of the day, and they're interested in you as a management team. So do it.
I love it. So I'm going to praise you, the lot of you there. Get your story right, get the best advisors, pick the right professionals, and back yourselves. I think I'm going to say back yourselves as well. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear these stories. Excuse me, to hear these stories directly from the people involved in creating the stories. We wish you all the very best, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you, all 3 of you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap up very shortly, but before we do, I'd like to welcome back our sponsors. So please would you bring back, ladies and gentlemen, from Baines Wilson, partner Jennifer Bell, from EY, Head of Corporate Finance in the North, Mark Clephan, and from LDC Investment Director, John Clarke. Just wait for John. Oh, well, we'll start with the 2 of you. You're all here. Very straightforward. Jennifer, what have we learned today?
I think the key things from my perspective, Richard, is definitely to not rush into things. Preparation is really, really key if you're thinking of going down this route, whether it be preparing your business ready for it being looked at by private equity, and also preparing and researching that private equity partner going forward, and also really to make sure you've got that right team in place that can support you properly through the entire process from the very beginning to the very end and beyond.
Thank you very much. And to you, Mark Clephan, what have you learned today? What final observations can you share?
Well, just in relation to the last panel, I suppose I think something that people can do is, yeah, there's some good prep you could do, and as people said, you should definitely do that. But if you're thinking about it, speak to everyone involved in the process. Speak to advisors; they'll give you a perspective. But go out and speak to Hayley and Gary and other people that have been through the process and get a feel for what it's like from the horse's mouth, rather than the process and John's side of the table. See the whole picture, I suppose, would be something I'd advise people to do.
Thank you. And John, what have you learned today? What observations would you like to share?
Sorry, just on me. I think, to Mark's point, I think the opportunity for people to engage with a very willing audience in the private equity community. There's nothing genuinely we like to hear more than the stories that Hayley has, that Ian has, that Gary has. Outside of business, just hearing about those journeys and those ambitions is fantastic for us. And hopefully, if people are interested in private equity, then recognise that we are simple people ultimately, and keen to discuss and help where we can.
Can we roll on that again? Don't say we're simple people. How about we're straightforward northern talking folk, but simple. I'm not having simple. You're not simple. But before you go away, so I was just about to do it, and I'm glad I didn't. John, one final tip to our audience. Just give them one thing to take away.
Final tip to take away, I think, is just think about where you want to take your business over the next 3 to 5, 7 years, and what are the tools that you need to get there. And if private equity can be a part of helping you get there, then pick up the phone to an advisor or us, and let's see where we can help.
And you, Mark, what's your final takeaway?
Think ahead. The process takes a long time, and arriving at knowing that you want to do a process takes a long time. So, bear that in mind and be thinking, years ahead around what your next step might be rather than months ahead.
Jen, how about you? Jennifer, what about you? What's final takeaway?
I think final takeaway for me is that it's actually a really positive and rewarding process, as we've heard from Hayley and Ian and Gary, and I think that positivity needs to flow through to the wider community.
Thank you very much. From my perspective, my takeaway is perhaps actually just a reflection of what John just said. They're all right, these guys, aren't they? They're up for a phone call. They don't mind if we don't follow through on it. They just want to give us a lift and help us grow our businesses and stuff. So why not? I'm going to ring these buggers up because who knows how they might be able to help me. So that is the conclusion of our formal business today, but please do stay with us. We are going to head over to the informal, glorious chaos of online networking in a little while. And who knows how that'll go, but I'm assuming it will be amusing. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for your many and varied contributions. Thank you to all our speakers, Steve Wall, Stuart Thompson, Jennifer Bell, Mark Clephan, John Clarke, Hayley Roberts, Ian Watson, and Gary Jacobson. Thanks to Lancashire Business Views partners on this event, without whom it could not have happened. Massive thanks, Baines Wilson, EY, and LDC. Thanks to our friends here at Big Tank Productions. I've got them either side and behind me for their televisual expertise. And I'd also like to thank the team at Lancashire Business View, all hidden right now, but all making it very much happen. The story of this conference will be reported online by our editor, Jed Henderson, and the whole conference will be available to watch back on demand. We'll also be publishing a version of this in our July-August edition, which is our 99th issue, ladies and gentlemen. So we hope that today's conversations are the beginning, not the end, that they start many more. Our speakers and our sponsors would welcome those conversations. See how they can help your business or your clients. Please do some business with them. Please refer them. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, if you can buy it in Lancashire, buy it in Lancashire. If you can sell it in Lancashire, sell it around the world. And if you're looking to invest, you know where to come. I've been Richard Slater on behalf of Lancashire Business View, and this has been Private Equity, How It Really Works. thank you all. And if you'll just stay with us, we'll be moving to the networking any second now. Thank you.